everyone, it's Thomas here. So today I'm going to introduce you to the Legend 40 Silverback from the company System Audio. We're looking at $5,000 USD, and that includes the stereo hub. But before you go $5,000, we're talking about a whole system here, meaning that that's all I need. This, 2 speakers, and my cell phone, and I'm ready to go. Now for those of you who are like, Thomas, I don't want to spend $5,000 on a system, don't worry, I'll still give you something to think about, because the logic as to why you should choose System Audio, what I'm trying to explain in this video, should also apply to speakers that are in the 500 zone. So one observation I have over the years is whenever somebody credible on YouTube endorse a product saying this is the best speaker for $1,000, you see a whole army of audiophile rushing out to buy those speakers. I get these kind of questions all the time. Thomas, I got $500. What is the best speaker to buy? My issue with it is always, there is no such thing as best speaker, but you have the right speaker out there for you. To know which speaker is the right speaker out there for you, you should at least know what is out there. And with that, once you know what your taste profile is, then your chances of making the right decision increases. System Audio is voice a bit different than the speakers I'm used to. You know, I love V-curve, right? Boosted treble, boosted bass. And these speakers, well, the owner is a musician. They're not voiced like that. And that's what makes it interesting. And for me, who receives email all the time asking for advice, I think this will appeal to a certain group of people who has emailed me in the past. In some sense, I wish I had tried this a bit earlier so that I could have recommended this speaker to that group of people. So in today's video, I'm going to start by telling you what I think really cool about this system. I'll tell you how it sounds. I'll go over the areas of opportunity, and then I'll wrap it up with some final thoughts. All right, so let's start with what's so cool about the system, okay? First, for those of you who are like, Thomas, you know what? Speaker cables are snake oil. The best cable is no cable. Guess what? I found the perfect system for you. There you go. You don't need any DAC. You don't need a preamp. You don't need a power amp. You don't even need speaker cables with this system. All you need is a stereo hub. You have a phone. You're ready to go. Either that, you can connect your computer to it, your CD player to it. And I actually A/B tested it, wireless and wired, to see if there's a difference in sound quality. And just like that, listening, no, there's no difference. It's quite impressive, the wireless connection between this stereo hub and the speaker. It uses WISA technology. Don't know how to pronounce it, but if you want, you can read up on it. And you don't need Wi-Fi for this to work at home. You can just connect your cell phone directly to it. Now, I didn't use my cell phone. I used mostly my computer connecting to it. Because if you look at the stereo hub, if you look at the back of it, it actually has a lot of connection. You can connect a CD player to it. Well, as I mentioned, your computer. You can even connect your own DAC to it. That's how I did my A/B test. And I like how reliable it is. It's not hard to set up. And the really cool part about these speakers, if you look at the back, you can connect up to 7 speakers to this wireless system. Next, for those of you who believe happy wife equals to happy life, I got the perfect solution for you. There you go. High wife acceptance factor. That's one of the first things I noticed when I took it out of the box. Sleek looking, modern looking, not gigantic, just the right size for a living room. My wife likes it. My friend, Mr. Quad, Mr. DIY, dropped by, took a look at it, and said, yeah, this will work well in my living room. My wife will be happy with it. In fact, they say if they were in a condo, yeah, this would be a perfect speaker for it. And one of the best part, this works well when you put it close to a wall, the way it's voiced, which I'll touch on a bit later on. So one other thing I noticed that's very interesting is the waveguide. If you take a look at it, look, it's housed inside a waveguide. So it disperses sound evenly in the room. Now, based on their website, it uses some kind of patent technology. And when I walk around the room and I listen to it, yeah, it sounds pretty good. But I do still have to say that for the best performance, you do have to sit in the sweet spot. And one more thing that's very impressive about this system is the power amps used in this speaker. You have 4 power amps in each speaker. Not just any power amp. You know the company Lindorf? Now, for those of you who don't know this company, they make very expensive integrated amps. In fact, my friend owns one before, and he brought it over. We even A/B tested against Audio Research and Macintosh gear. and both has its strength. The power amp inside is not Class D. Originally, I thought Lindorf, well, and this one too, uses a Class D power amp. It does not. It's a digital amp. And because it's a digital amp, you don't even need a DAC. I'm like, what? Really? I don't get it. Anyways, my point here is that the power amps used inside the speakers are no joke. And at 300 watts, yeah, you can push the volume. So let's talk about sound. Now, the owner of the company is a musician. So the first time when I heard it, I noticed, okay, it's a bit different than what I'm used to. I'm used to the V curve. Most of my speakers are voiced that way. But fortunately, I've gone over 70 pairs of speaker. So I'm open-minded when it comes to different voicing. So let's start with the treble. I find the treble expressive. I find it lively, detailed, and refined. It's detailed enough that it can compete with the focals that I have. Now, I've owned probably all the focals up to the Sopra 2. And the advantage of using a soft dome tweeter is that you don't have that ringing problem that I find with metal dome tweeters. So yes, it might not sparkle as much as a metal dome tweeter, but in terms of detail, it can absolutely challenge the focals that I have. Now, I did speak to the owner. His name is Ole. I think that's how I pronounce it. I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. About finding it slightly tilted up, the treble. And he showed me the measurements of these speakers, and it's not supposed to be. So this is subjective, what I'm hearing. And based on the measurements, the treble is not tilted up. When it comes to mid-range, I find it slightly lean sounding. Not thin sounding, it's still rich, there's still body to it. It's just whenever I come across speakers that's voiced that way, I notice that they have good layer. They're a good separation also. And that's one advantage I notice when speakers are voiced that way. Now, the fact that the way the mid-range is voiced like that, and you get a lot of detail with the top end. One thing I noticed that it does exceptionally well is at low volume. This is important. If you have these speakers in a condo, for example, or if you're somebody like me who don't want to listen loud at nighttime, this is fantastic at low volume. I hear all the information, all the detail, even at low volume. Not often that I say something like this because most of the speaker, well, actually a lot of the speakers I try, you need to hit a certain volume to go like, oh, okay, sounds pretty good. But these at low volume sounds pretty good. And maybe because of the waveguide, it's also dynamic. So next, let's talk about the bass. Now, these are rated to go down to 20 Hertz. And one thing I notice whenever I come across active speakers, and when I compare it to its counterpart, the passive version, the active version, for some reason, can go way lower. Now, these have DSP built in, so they are rated to go down to 20 Hertz. And when the first time I posted on my community page, telling people, dude, these things go down to 20 Hertz, some of you are like, whoa, the bass must be insane on these speakers. I think this is a misconception. Just because we look at the data and saying these speakers can go from, let's say, 40 kilohertz all the way down to 30 hertz or 20 hertz, because it can go very low, people think that you're going to get that visceral punching, pounding bass. These are nothing like that. A lot of the speaker, as I mentioned, has that V-curve voicing, right? There's a bump somewhere in the bass region. I don't feel it with these speakers. I feel it neutral. In fact, when I first got it, what I did, I actually pushed it close to the wall. And it sounds good when it's close to a wall. But fortunately, I've gone over 70 pairs of speaker, and I understand one important thing. It's that you have to give speaker time to understand it and appreciate it. So eventually, once I start pulling the speakers out, that's where I realized, okay, this kind of voicing has its advantage. Whatever I'm hearing in the lower notes area, the bass area, is more defined and more clear. There's more clarity to it. And the fact that it goes down to 20 hertz, there are times where there's certain music I listen to when you have bass notes or anything that goes really low. There are times where I go like, wow, that is pretty low. So what you're getting is not that kind of like Serving Vega party type of bass, right? Party speakers. Sometimes when I come across these speakers are bass heavy, I call them party speakers. You're not getting that. You're getting a more refined, defined bass, fast and tight. And that's where it reminds me, for many of you who have emailed me in the past, this would be the perfect speaker for you. Now I did try with dual rail subs. It does add richness to the bass region, but that's true also whenever I pair the rail subs to any speakers I own. So for those of you who want to add a bit of more meat in the bass region, you can just add a small sub to it. It'll work really well. The best part, as I mentioned, because of the Wave's voice, when you push it close to a wall, it still sounds very good. A lot of the speakers I try, when you push it close to a wall, you're going to hear this boominess to the bass, and you don't have that problem with this speaker. So what are the areas of opportunity? Well, number one, the remote. It's not instantaneous. There's a bit of lag to it. Second, like all active speaker, there's a bit of noise when it's idle. Now this, compared to all the other active speaker I've tried, has the least noise, but that's something I noticed with all the active speaker I own. Now if you're just sitting in, let's say, in your listening spot, you're not going to hear it. You have to get very close and you have to go like this to hear it. And I'm not being fair, because a lot of other amps that I have this issue, especially with tubes. So it's not really an issue, but I think it's worth mentioning. The last, it's not really an area of opportunity, but rather an observation. One thing I noticed when it comes to scale, it doesn't compare to my own speakers, my own full-size tower speakers. It's normal, right? If you put it next to my speakers, look at the size, there's a significant gap. It doesn't feel like a bookshelf speaker, all right? Let's get that out of the way. But it just doesn't have the same scale as my bigger speakers. Well, of course, they have the bigger model, so if that's a concern, you can get the bigger model too. So what do I think about the Legend 40 Silverback with the stereo hub? You know what? It's actually easier to review budget gear, because today's budget gear, their performance is incredible for the money. So once I factor in the price, it's easy to recommend budget gear. With higher end gear at $5,000, a lot more picky. Now for those of you who don't follow me, my own reference gear usually is in the 20 grand MRSP. With that kind of performance as my reference point, I would say the Legend 40 with the stereo hub sounds good. Now if you want the system to sound great, you will need to pair it with something that's better in the front end. And it's something that I do all the time. Whatever I get, I try to see what's the maximum performance of the gear that I review. So in this case, what I did, I connected to my own DAC, the Exasound E28, the Modrec LS100. That's a tube preamp. Now that combo maybe 7K USD MRSP, and when I plug it to the speakers with XLR cables, it elevates the performance significantly. Now this tells me that the power amp in these speakers are pretty good. Now, for those of you who say, I don't know if I want to spend another 7 grand adding to the system, you can also go with a solution like maybe adding just a DAC to the front end. You know, DAC these days, they work both as a preamp and as a DAC. Yeah, I did that with the Exasound, connecting directly to the speakers. It sounds great. You can also try maybe a Lumen streamer if you need that streaming functionality. So there are other options out there to elevate the performance. The stereo hub is only about 600 something USD. So it's still a very good buy for what you're getting. It all depends on what you want. Now regarding the performance of the speaker, just the speaker itself, I spent some time thinking about it, because they actually make the passive version, which is around 2,800 USD. So I was figuring, okay, 2008, what can I compare to that I've owned in the past? KEF R700 came to mind, and I invited Frederick to drop by because he owns a pair of KEF R700, and we both agree that comparing both, the KEF R700 has a bit more bass punch, but the Legend 40 was more refined, was more detail on top, and yeah, the bass dig deeper. The point here is that both speakers are performing in that $3,000 to $4,000 zone. So if you ever decide to buy the Legend 40 just standalone for 2008, it is a good buy. And I remember when I swapped between the budget speakers, yeah, at one point I was listening to only budget speaker, and one day I decided, okay, it's time to move to the Legend 40. Once I put it in, I'm like, whoa, this is like jumping levels. And that budget speaker was about $1,000, I would say, yeah. And this, yeah, it jumped level. I remember messaging Jay and Sean about it and say, wow, what a difference, man, between these budget speaker and these higher end speakers. And I remember Sean like messaging back like, really? You think so? You pay more, you get more? Is that something new? Prick. All right, guys, so I'm going to wrap it up at this point, and I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning of the video, where there's no such thing as best speaker, but rather the right speaker for you. For me, there's no such thing because our taste is different. What is important, however, is that we should have the knowledge what's out there. So when we go choose speakers, we know that, okay, that kind of speaker might fit my profile. For example, if I like soundstage is the most important for me, then I should be looking at electrostatic speakers. If I didn't know the Manapan LRS exists out there, I might miss out on the opportunity and go buy something like Eclipse RP600M just because everybody says that that speaker is a fantastic speaker. So for those of you who are thinking, Thomas, there's KEF, there's monitor audio, there's dying audio out there, why should I consider system audio? It's because they're voiced differently than those speakers. Not everyone is able to handle the metal dome tweeter, for example. Not everyone wants the serving Vega type of bass. And if what I say in this video, the type of voicing is what you're looking for in a speaker, this is where you should consider system audio, because you also get a chance to try it at home. Now, there might be a restocking fee, I'm not too sure, you double check on that. One thing I did learn, having gone through a lot of speakers, is that you need time. You need to spend time with each speaker to really understand it. And one thing I learned with listening to the system audio for a longer period of time than what most people get a chance to, is that you start to appreciate that different voicing has different strength. And that's why I think it's important that when you audition speakers, you should take your time, especially at the comfort of your home. So with that said, I'm going to finish the video with a sound demo. In the sound demo, what I'm trying to compare is wireless versus wired. Can you hear a big difference? Okay, number one. And number two, something to keep in mind, the recording is a bit bright in itself. And I noticed that with the RS2 versus the Musical Paradise recording, when I was comparing both DACs. I think it's important to know it's all relative, okay? Don't listen in terms of absolute terms. So if you hear it sounding bright in your system, it doesn't mean that it's bright in real life. I have to clarify that because I noticed some people gave up on the RS2 just because they sounded a bit bright in their system. Alright guys, so till next time.
Like two fires, movement so graceful. Wildcat in the jungle with dangerous claws. Movement she anticipates, a sight is set on her prey. Like stars in the darkest night, crystallize, fascinate. If you wanna stay alive, if you don't wanna be her prey, don't stand in her way. Run, run, run away. Crystallize, 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 watching her prey. Crystallize, 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 fascinate. Like two fires, movement so graceful. Wildcat in the jungle with dangerous claws. Movement she anticipates, a sight is set on her prey. Like stars in the darkest night, crystallize, fascinate. If you wanna stay alive, if you don't wanna be her prey, don't stand in her way. Run, run, run away. Crystallize, 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 watching her prey. Crystallize, 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 fascinate. Sorry.